Hey everyone, I'm Nico from Licks of the Beast, and in this video I'm going to tell you all about this 2020 model Jackson San Dimas Adrian Smith signature. I've always loved the look of Adrian's white Jackson ever since I can remember. It always stood out to me from the images of the Somewhere in Time and Seven Sun tours, and then when I saw him playing a white Jackson again on the Somewhere Back in Time tour in 2008, it just looked right. Before then, between the Ed Hunter and the Matter of Life and Death tours, he'd been playing mainly Fender Strats and Gibson SGs, and don't get me wrong, it still looked awesome. Let's face it, Adrian Smith would look cool even if he was holding an old broomstick on stage. But there's just something about that Jackson. And I especially liked this one with the white on white and ebony fretboard with abalone inlays. It just looks so rich. But as much as I like this guitar's awesome looks, I never really thought much about owning one because I've never had any real interest in signature models. And certainly not enough to spend 3,500 Canadian dollars on one. So I always just enjoyed admiring it from afar. After I started Licks of the Beast, I was of course watching a lot more live footage of Iron Maiden than I ever had before, and as it happens, I found myself really drawn to Adrian's signature Jacksons. Enough for me to finally pick up one of the SDX models last year. And I was perfectly happy with that guitar, and I still am, but finally, a year later, I came upon this 2020 US model on Reverb, and I caved. And here we are. So I've owned this guitar for almost 2 months now, but I've only really been playing it for about a week as it didn't come without a few challenges. You see, when I got this guitar, it was in need of a good setup, so it was feeling a little bit stiff. I brought it in for a setup, picked it up after about a week, and it was better, but there was still way too much fret buzz, and it still felt a little bit too stiff. Now, I will admit to being a bit picky with guitars. I can be quite obsessive with things like sharp frets, stiff necks, action being too low or too high, and fret buzz makes me feel like, you know how when you have a cold you can kind of function somewhat normally but you always feel a little bit off? Like that. So it was making me crazy that this guitar that I had just spent a ton of money on was basically playing a lot worse than my cheapest guitar, which is the Jackson SDX, and that guitar plays great. So back to the luthier it went for more tweaks to the setup, as well as a fret dress. A few weeks later, I got it back, and now I'm super happy with this instrument, and I can finally appreciate why so many people seem to absolutely love theirs. Jackson truly did a phenomenal job designing and building these guitars. As soon as you pick it up, you know you're holding a very high quality instrument. Adrian himself has stated that he could easily just grab one of these off the rack and go play a show the same way he would with his own guitar. And I can see why he would say that because again, this thing is fantastic. Alright, let's take a look at some nice B-roll so that I can show you this guitar up close and tell you all about it. This is a San Dimas style body, which is basically identical to a Stratocaster. It's made of alder and it's got a nice weight to it. I like the way heavier guitars feel, and this one is 8 pounds 5 ounces, which is almost 1 pound more than an American Pro Stratocaster. The bridge is a non-recessed Floyd Rose original double locking trem, which I have to say stays in tune really well. It's definitely nice to pick up a guitar right out of the case and not have to tune up before you start jamming or practicing. The bridge pickup is a DiMarzio Super Distortion DP100, which is nothing fancy, but it's just perfect for that classic heavy rock and metal sound. It screams when it has to, and it's tight enough without sounding cold or hollow. It still keeps a certain warmth and roundness that suits my playing style really well. The middle and neck pickups are Samarium Cobalt Noiseless or SCN single coils, and these were designed by Bill Lawrence. Pickup selection is done via a 5-way switch, and controls are kept simple with just one knob each for volume and tone. The one new feature with the 2020 models is the heel mount truss rod adjustment wheel. This is, of course, something that really should have been included in these guitars from the get-go. So after 10 years, it was about time. Now, it's not the end of the world, but I just find that in this segment, some things should just be standard. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to be able to make a quick adjustment whenever you need it. The neck is what I believe to be the big standout on this guitar. It's the one thing that immediately lets you know the high level of craftsmanship as soon as you pick it up. It's a bolt-on, quarter-sawn maple neck with graphite reinforcement and a urethane finish on the back. And it's a pretty thin neck. Not Ibanez Wizard thin, but there's no mistaking this for a classic Strat. The fretboard is a beautiful ebony with 12 to 16-inch compound radius, which means it's also pretty flat. You get 22 jumbo frets and abalone dot inlays, which give the guitar a really premium look. Now let's check out some sounds. Starting with high gain, as this is what you'd use this guitar for at least 80% of the time. And now let me show you how it sounds in the clean channel. I love how dynamic the sound is on this guitar. Every pickup position has a distinct tonal color, if you will, and it actually felt very natural just now to play something different for each of the 5 positions. And I really like the sound of the SCN single coil pickups. They're Strat-like and spanky enough, but a bit more modern sounding so that they work a bit better in a heavy rock or metal context. Compared to vintage Strat pickups, they're a bit more neutral and bright, and again, they have enough of that Strat vibe without screaming blues. So here are some final thoughts on this guitar. Honestly, I don't have anything surprising or shocking to say. It's exactly what you expect from a US-made Signature Series Jackson. It's a truly beautiful, well-made instrument that feels and sounds excellent. Whenever I pick up this guitar, I can just focus on what I'm playing or practicing, or if I'm just jamming, I can get lost in the music and I don't ever have to think about the guitar. Now, it might not have the mojo or the charm of my Destroyer or Gold Top Les Paul, but this is the kind of guitar that you can take into any situation and it'll work perfectly both in terms of looks and sounds. It does everything well, and it's an absolute pleasure to play. And for those of you who asked or have been wondering about how this compares to the well-priced Indonesian-made SDX model, let me put it this way. I have no plans to sell my SDX. I still love it, I still play it all the time, and I still think it's a phenomenal guitar. The thing to keep in mind is that this US model follows the exact specs of the guitars Jackson makes for Adrian. The SDX is similar enough, but is ultimately a more cost-effective Super Strat based on Adrian's signature guitar. Now, aside from the pickups, which can be easily upgraded, the real big difference is in the neck. A neck like this one costs more than the entire SDX guitar, so of course there's going to be a difference. But that doesn't make the SDX neck any less nice to play. It's a little more rounded and not quite as wide, so some people might actually prefer the SDX neck despite the materials and craftsmanship not being the same quality. Now, I can make a comparison video at some point if that's something you're interested in seeing, but for now this should give you a good enough idea. That's it for this review. Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.